This tutorial will explain how to record scores and adjust standings using LeagueLab. We're assuming you have a LeagueLab demo account with a league created and with some games scheduled. If you haven't done those things yet, you may want to take a look at the previous tutorials and then come back to this one. First, we need to find the league we're looking for here in our dashboard. The one we want, is the only one, is right here with its edge up against the blue line, which represents today. As the leagues progress, they'll move from right to left across the dashboard, so you can see at a glance how far along they are. This one has just started, so it's beginning its trip from right to left. To enter the scores, we're going to click Schedule and Scores. And the scores will be entered here on the same page where we made the schedule. When we were working with the schedule, we noticed that we have the counts of the games for each date up here at the top. Well, now that our league is underway, we have a little bit more information. This gray bar represents today, and as it moves along, it's going to separate the leagues that have the dates that have already happened from the dates that will happen in the future. This date's already happened, and we see we have 4 games scheduled and 0 games scored, so we better get to work. Remember, we can also scroll down to the date in question by clicking on the date there. So here we are at Thursday, September 9th. This is the date that just happened, so we have some scores for it. To record a score, we're going to click on the game to open up the game editor. And the most basic thing to do is just enter in a score for each team. Here we have 14 points for Team H and 20 points for Team E. We click Save, and that locks in the scores. And now we can just move on to the next game. This time we'll get a little fancier. We'll record a score, let's say 14 for Team B, 7 for Team D. We're also going to record a player of the game for this one. So let's say that the winning team, Team B, was the team that had the player of the game, and by selecting that, we get a pull down of Team B's players here. So we're going to give the player of the game to the quarterback for Team B, whose name is Jimmy Quarterback, and we can also enter in why Jimmy is such a good player. Let's say in this particular game, Jimmy had 2 TD passes and no interceptions. We can save that game and move on to the next one. We see that we do have Jimmy's info there about how he was the player of the game. The next game here, notice that it automatically puts my cursor into that score box, so I can just type 12 for Team C, and if I hit Tab, I'll automatically move into the next score box. Say Team G had 17 points, and I can save that right there. For the final game, we're going to say that Team F actually forfeited to test Team A. So Team F didn't show up. The way we record a forfeit is we click this Record a Forfeit button, and the interface changes a little bit, and we just need to decide which team won by forfeit. So Team A won because Team F didn't show up. Save that game, and this does something a little bit different. This adds a note to the schedule saying Team F forfeited to Team A, and it cleared that game slot. The reason we do that is because some leagues may actually have a different game that takes place. Maybe we try our best and we get Team A a game because they did show up, and maybe Team D stays and plays a doubleheader. Now some leagues might choose to count that game and put it on the schedule. Others might say it's just an exhibition game, but if you do need to add it to the schedule, you can right there. Along with scores and players of the game, you can add other content to get people excited about the league. I'm going to choose new content here, and I'm going to create a Team of the Week entry for Jimmy's team. So we can just add the title, header, and body here. So we can reflect the excitement that happened out there on that date. We see we're back to the schedule, and now that entry shows up right there along with the icon that the team captain uploaded if they have one. And that just sort of adds to the excitement and sort of gets people coming back to the website, gets people excited about what's going on here. That's about it for recording the results here. Let's have a look at the public site and see what they look like there. We have a link here at the top of the page to the public schedule page. You'll see links to related pages here in your League Directors admin just to help getting around a little bit easier. So if I click there, I see the public version of the page. It's very similar except it doesn't have all the controls. We see the scores are in the games there. We have the player of the game. We have our little write-up about Team B. Let's also look at the standings here. So here we see the teams automatically ranked based on their performance during that first game date. The first criteria for ranking the teams is their ranking points, which is calculated based on the number of wins, losses, and ties that they have. Second is the power index, which is a strength of schedule metric that's made up by adding up the ranking points of the teams that you've beat. Right now they're all 0 because anybody who's been beaten hasn't won and therefore has no ranking points. And last of all, they're ordered by the points allowed. If you don't like the way that these standings are created, there are a couple of different things you can do about it, so let's go into those now. We'll go back to our admin. We're still on the schedule page here. We get to our standings admin either here, or we can use the league navigation interface here, look at the standings for this league. The top area talks about standing schemes. This is how we control how many points are given, how many ranking points are given for wins, losses, and so on. What we can do here is we can change which standing scheme we're using. Right now we're using the site default, and it says here that our site default is the basic standing scheme. So to find out what standing schemes are all about, let's click here and we will visit the standing schemes configuration. We have 3 standing schemes so far. We can control which our current standing scheme is and then update that, and then any league that's set to default will now use punish losers. And we see that for each standing scheme, for wins, losses, draws, wins by forfeit, and losses by forfeit, there's a certain number of points allocated. We also can configure for each standing scheme whether to count games against teams in different divisions if we have multiple divisions and some crossover games. We can also create our own custom standing schemes, so let's do that first. Okay, I'm going to call this custom. Next is the public description. This can be really important. If we look back at the public standings for just a second, we see that we have a little section here called How Are Standings Calculated. This is the public description for the standing scheme you're using. So whatever we write there will convey to our players how they earn those standing points, or those ranking points. And we can be as verbose as we want here to make sure that they really understand what's going on and that they feel reassured that, you know, there's some method behind the madness. So let's say we're going to give winners 3 points this time, because I don't want to give as many points for a forfeit win as I do for a regular win. I'm going to give 2 points for a win by forfeit and take away a point if you lose by forfeit. So here we enter in the number of points. There we go, and I'm going to leave this unchecked. I'm going to count all the games, whether they're across divisions or not. I can save this scheme, so now I've created my own custom standing scheme. It's a lot like reward winners here, except we don't reward the winners by forfeit quite as much, and we actually punish the losers as well. So then I'm going to change that. Now my custom standing scheme is the default standing scheme for all leagues in my site, unless I choose to override that on a particular league. Let's go back and see how that affected our public standings. Okay, so we see that the team that won by forfeit now only has 2 ranking points, which is less than the teams that won in a real game. And then everything else is roughly the same as it was before. We're mostly sorting by points allowed among these large groups of ties here. If the amount of flexibility that we get with custom standing schemes still isn't enough, we have something else we can do. If we go back to the standings for our particular league, this bottom section actually lets us reorder those teams any way we want. So if you have some custom calculations that you do that League Lab doesn't know anything about and it's really complicated, you can do those calculations. Then all you have to do is come here, enable manual standings, and now each of these teams is draggable. So maybe my super secret special formula for calculating standings is that I put teams in alphabetical order. I can just drag them around until they match my ordering, and once they're ready I click Save Changes, and they're locked in. I can go back to the public site and I see that now they're all sorted. We also have the note here that says the rankings have been manually adjusted so that somebody doesn't look at the calculations and think that we sorted wrong. And we also see our customized public description of our standings right there. So that's about it for entering scores and configuring standings for your League Lab tournaments and leagues.